From the moment a human being becomes aware of existence, a silent tension awakens within, the pull between the body and the soul. The body craves comfort, pleasure, and survival. The soul longs for truth, transcendence, and meaning. One seeks the earth, the other the heavens. And between these two forces lies the essence of what it means to be human, a being stretched between dust and divinity. Every civilization, religion, and philosophy has wrestled with this paradox. How to live in a body without being enslaved by it. How to pursue spiritual elevation without denying our physical nature. This is the eternal human dilemma. In modern times, this tension has only deepened. The body dominates our culture, glorified through screens, obsessed over in routines of consumption and appearance. Yet beneath the glitter, the soul grows restless. Depression, anxiety, and spiritual emptiness whisper that something essential is being forgotten. Humanity seems to have mastered the science of living, but forgotten the art of being alive. We know how to extend life, but not how to fill it with purpose. We know how to feed the body, but the soul still starves. On the other side, those who seek spirituality often fall into another imbalance, rejecting the body altogether as if holiness demanded denial of the flesh. Some retreat from the world, mistaking asceticism for enlightenment. But to deny the body is to reject the vessel through which the soul experiences creation. The body is not the enemy of the soul. It is its instrument, its language, its temple. When neglected or worshipped, it becomes an obstacle. When understood and disciplined, it becomes a bridge. This fragile equilibrium between desire and discipline, between matter and spirit, defines the human journey. And perhaps no thinker understood this dance better than Moses ben Maimon, known to the world as Maimônides. Living in the 12th century, at the crossroads of faith and reason, he faced the same question that still haunts us. How can we honor both the needs of the body and the aspirations of the soul without falling into excess or neglect? For Maimônides, the human being was not a battlefield between good and evil, but a system designed for harmony. He believed that the Creator made nothing in vain, not our intellect, not our emotions, not our physicality. Each part of our being has a purpose within the grand architecture of divine wisdom. The problem is not the existence of desire, but its disorder. Not the body itself, but our ignorance of its role in the spiritual hierarchy. Imagine the human condition as a musical instrument. The soul is the melody, the body, the instrument's wood and strings. Without the body, the melody has no sound. Without the soul, the instrument produces only noise. Balance, then, is the art of tuning both so they resonate in harmony. When the strings of desire are too tight, they snap in asceticism. When too loose, they produce distortion in indulgence. The wise musician, the balanced human, learns to tune both body and soul to the rhythm of purpose. Throughout history, this tuning has been misunderstood. Some believe the body must be subdued through suffering. Others claim the soul is an illusion and only the material world is real. Maimônides rejected both extremes. He saw them as forms of blindness, one spiritual, the other intellectual. To him, the human being was a bridge between heaven and earth, and wisdom was the art of crossing it consciously. This bridge is fragile, but it is also sacred. To walk it is to live in awareness, neither escaping life nor being consumed by it. The imbalance between body and soul manifests not only in individuals, but in entire societies. A culture obsessed with consumption becomes physically alive but spiritually dead. A culture obsessed with purity and denial becomes spiritually rigid but emotionally cold. In both cases, the human essence, that delicate balance of reason, feeling, and faith, is lost. Maimônides lived in a world of similar conflicts, between religion and science, between philosophy and faith, between tradition and reason. And rather than choosing sides, he sought integration. He understood that every extreme is a form of sickness, a symptom of forgetting the center. For him, health, both physical and spiritual, was not the absence of struggle, but the dynamic balance between opposing forces. Just as the body requires equilibrium between warmth and cold, the soul requires equilibrium between passion and restraint. The path to virtue is not a rejection of emotion, but its education. The path to holiness is not flight from the world, but presence within it, guided by reason and illuminated by faith. At the heart of Maimônides' wisdom lies a conviction both radical and simple. To serve God is to serve with the whole being, mind, heart, and body in harmony. To ignore one is to weaken the others. True worship is not found in extremes, but in the middle path. He wrote that a person should direct all their acts toward one goal, to know God. This does not mean escaping the world, but living within it intelligently, turning every action, eating, resting, studying, loving, into a conscious step toward balance. This idea challenges our modern assumptions. We divide life into compartments: work versus rest, faith versus logic, pleasure versus duty. Maimônides invites us to dissolve these false divisions. To eat with gratitude is an act of worship. To study with humility is a form of prayer. To care for the body wisely is to honor the Creator of life. The spiritual and the physical are not enemies. They are two languages expressing the same truth. The more harmoniously they speak, the closer we approach understanding. The question then is not whether we should live for the body or the soul, but how to make them allies in the pursuit of wisdom. The answer, as Maimônides will show, is neither indulgence nor denial. It is mastery through understanding. The soul must guide, the body must serve, and the intellect must mediate between them like a wise king governing his realm. In the quiet spaces of reflection, every human feels this longing, the desire to live a life of meaning without renouncing the joy of existence. To walk, to love, to work, to think, and still feel connected to something eternal. This is not fantasy. It is the natural state of a soul in harmony with its body. It is what Maimônides called the golden mean, the noble balance between excess and deficiency, the equilibrium that leads to virtue and inner peace. And so, our journey begins here, with this simple yet profound question: how can we, in the chaos of modern life, recover that harmony between body and soul that Maimônides so wisely described? The next step is to understand his perspective, how his philosophy, born in a distant century, still speaks to our restless hearts today. To understand Maimônides' approach to the balance between body and soul, we must first understand the world in which he lived, a world of tension between revelation and reason. Born in Córdoba, Spain in 1138, he grew up during a time when the great civilizations of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity were all wrestling with the same question: can human reason coexist with divine faith? For Maimônides, this was not merely a theoretical puzzle, it was the foundation of his life's work. As a rabbi, physician, and philosopher, Maimônides stood at the intersection of three worlds: the sacred, the rational, and the practical. He saw in medicine the wisdom of the body, in philosophy the discipline of the mind, and in the Torah the guidance of the soul. To him, these were not separate paths, but one unified road toward truth. His monumental works, The Guide for the Perplexed, Mishneh Torah, and the 8 chapters, were attempts to map that road, to show that reason, revelation, and ethics could not only coexist but complete each other. In The Guide for the Perplexed, Maimônides addressed those who, like himself, found their faith shaken by intellectual inquiry. He saw no conflict between the two. Rather, he believed that both reason and revelation came from the same divine source. If truth is one, he argued, then the study of nature, the physical world, and the study of Torah, the moral and spiritual world, must lead to the same destination. The contradiction lies not in God's creation, but in human misunderstanding. Accept the truth, he wrote, from whoever says it. For Maimônides, truth had no enemies. This conviction shaped his view of the human being. He saw man as a microcosm of the universe, a blend of intellect and matter, of eternal soul and mortal flesh. To neglect one side was to distort the image of God within. The intellect, he taught, is the highest faculty of the human being, the spark of the divine that allows us to understand and connect with the Creator. But intellect cannot operate in a vacuum. It depends on the body, the senses, emotions, and desires which provide the raw material of experience. The body gathers, the mind refines, the soul contemplates. When these elements are aligned, knowledge becomes wisdom, and wisdom becomes worship. In the 8 chapters, Maimonides explored this harmony through the lens of moral psychology. Drawing from Aristotle yet grounding his thought in Torah, he described the soul as composed of several faculties: the nutritive, the appetitive, the imaginative, and the rational. Each has its proper function. When the appetites dominate, the person becomes enslaved to desire. When the intellect rules, guided by moral virtue, the person achieves balance, a state he called Zelem Elohim, the image of God. For Maimonides, ethics was not mere behavior. It was the architecture of the soul. He rejected both the hedonist, who worships the body, and the ascetic, who despises it. The hedonist mistakes pleasure for happiness, drowning the intellect in endless craving. The ascetic, in rejecting the material world, insults the wisdom of the Creator who made it good. Maimonides instead proposed the golden mean, the middle path of moderation. He compared the moral life to medicine. Just as the physician restores the body to health by correcting its imbalances, the wise man restores the soul to harmony by tempering its extremes. The virtuous life, therefore, is a form of healing. This metaphor is not coincidental. Maimonides was himself a practicing physician, one of the most renowned of his time. His medical writings reveal not only technical knowledge, but deep compassion and insight into the human condition. He saw health as a divine duty, not a luxury. The body, he said, is the instrument through which the soul performs its service to God. To neglect it through gluttony or self-abuse is to sin. To care for it wisely is an act of righteousness. It is impossible, he wrote, to understand or know anything of the Creator when one is sick or in pain. In other words, physical well-being is the foundation upon which spiritual awareness is built. Maimonides' synthesis of medicine and theology reveals a profound truth. Balance is not merely moral, it is existential. The health of the body mirrors the health of the soul. When the body is disordered, the mind loses clarity. When the soul is corrupted, the body follows into decay. This unity of being is central to his vision. He saw no separation between the scientific and the sacred, for both belong to the same order of divine wisdom. In this sense, Maimonides anticipated the holistic philosophies that would only emerge centuries later. Yet his vision was not naive. He knew the difficulty of maintaining this harmony. In the Guide for the Perplexed, he warned that most people live enslaved to imagination and passion, unable to see beyond the surface of things. The wise, he said, must train their intellect as one trains the body. Through discipline, humility, and persistence, knowledge without virtue becomes arrogance. Faith without understanding becomes superstition. The task of the philosopher is not to escape life, but to illuminate it. In the Mishneh Torah, his great codification of Jewish law, Maimonides took this philosophy and turned it into practical guidance. There, he instructed not only how to pray or fast, but how to eat, rest, and think. He advised moderation in diet, temperance in speech, and regular exercise, all grounded in the idea that serving God requires physical vitality. His view of law was not legalism, but pedagogy, a way to shape the body and the soul toward perfection. The commandments, in his eyes, were not arbitrary decrees, but instruments of balance, designed to refine human nature. What makes Maimonides unique is not merely his intellect, but his integrity. He lived what he taught. Exiled, persecuted and burdened with the responsibilities of his community, he maintained serenity through the discipline of reason and the faith of the soul. In his letters, we glimpse his humility, a man who saw his own knowledge as small before the infinite wisdom of God. For him, philosophy was not pride, but worship. Study was not escape, but devotion. Every act of understanding brought him closer to the divine. Maimônides' model of balance challenges us to see spirituality not as withdrawal, but as engagement. The body is to be disciplined, not destroyed. Desire is to be purified, not suppressed. The intellect is to serve, not to dominate. The ultimate goal is unity, the alignment of all parts of the human being toward the knowledge and love of God. This harmony, he believed, is the true image of perfection. The genius of Maimônides lies in his ability to see no contradiction between the sacred text and scientific inquiry, between divine mystery and rational explanation. Where others saw conflict, he saw complementarity. To him, faith without reason was blindness. Reason without faith was emptiness. The two must walk hand in hand, each guiding the other toward truth. For this reason, he became known as Hanagid, the guide, not only for the perplexed of his own age, but for every generation seeking equilibrium between body and soul. And so the question deepens. If balance is the purpose of creation and the essence of virtue, how does one live it? How can reason and faith, intellect and devotion, body and soul be woven together in daily life without one consuming the other? This is the mystery Maimônides sought to resolve through his spiritual synthesis, the theme we now turn to next. To Maimônides, the highest human achievement was not merely the accumulation of knowledge nor the performance of rituals, but the transformation of knowledge into devotion, the harmonizing of the intellect with the love of God. In this synthesis, faith and reason cease to be rivals. They become partners in revealing the unity that underlies all existence. The balance between body and soul is therefore not only a moral condition, but a metaphysical truth, the reflection of divine harmony within the human being. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimônides explains that the purpose of philosophy is not speculation for its own sake, but the perfection of the soul. The study of nature and logic, mathematics and medicine all serve to refine the intellect so that it may contemplate the divine. Yet, he insists, knowledge alone cannot reach God. Intellect without humility is like a candle that burns without warmth, bright but lifeless. Only when the intellect bows before the mystery of creation does wisdom become worship. The more man knows of the works of God, he wrote, the more he will love him. Thus the study of the world becomes an act of devotion. Science itself becomes a form of prayer. This idea that understanding can lead to love is the heart of Maimônides' spiritual synthesis. He rejects both blind faith and cold rationalism. For him, faith without reason is superstition, while reason without faith is arrogance. True wisdom lies in their union. The intellect leads us to recognize the order, beauty, and precision of creation. The heart responds in awe and gratitude. The more we comprehend, the more we revere. This is not the love of ignorance, but of enlightenment, the love that arises when the soul sees the fingerprints of God in every atom of existence. Maimônides believed that the human being is uniquely designed for this experience. The body anchors us in the material world, the intellect lifts us toward the eternal, and the soul harmonizes both through consciousness. The purpose of life, then, is to bring these dimensions into unity, to make the finite reflect the infinite. When this harmony is achieved, the human being becomes a living mirror of divine wisdom. The body serves without rebellion, the intellect guides without pride, and the soul reigns with serenity. In this state, one no longer seeks God outside, for he is found in the very act of understanding. This is why Maimônides saw the commandments not as arbitrary tests of obedience, but as instruments of inner transformation. The dietary laws, for example, train moderation. The laws of charity cultivate compassion. The Sabbath cultivates rest and reflection. Every commandment, he said, has a rational and spiritual purpose, to discipline the body so that the soul may flourish. When the physical and the spiritual work together, holiness ceases to be an abstract idea and becomes a rhythm of daily life. To eat with gratitude, to think with clarity, to love with discernment, these are acts of worship as sacred as prayer. The harmony between faith and reason in Maimônides' thought is not a compromise, but a convergence. He saw both as rays from the same light, different paths leading to the same truth. Revelation is divine truth expressed in symbols accessible to all. Philosophy is divine truth pursued through intellect accessible to the few. The wise, therefore, must interpret revelation through reason, not against it. Allegory and metaphor, he explained, are the language through which Scripture conveys truths too vast for literal expression. When understood properly, revelation and science illuminate rather than contradict each other. This approach allows the human being to embrace the full spectrum of existence, from the senses to the spirit, from logic to love. In Maimônides' vision, the philosopher-priest is not divided between heaven and earth. He lives as a bridge between them. His worship is intellectual. His intellect is devotional. He eats to strengthen his body for study, studies to enlighten his soul for prayer, and prays to align his will with the divine order. Nothing in his life is wasted. Every act becomes a step toward harmony. Such is the meaning of spiritual synthesis, the art of transforming daily life into a reflection of divine unity. To achieve this, Maimônides calls for a disciplined soul. Balance cannot be attained through emotion alone. It requires structure and understanding. He likens the process to the education of a child. The impulses must first be tamed, then guided, and finally transformed. The appetites of the body must learn to serve the purposes of the intellect. The mind must learn to see through the illusions of desire and pride. When this inner hierarchy is established, body serving mind, mind serving soul, and soul serving God, the human being achieves peace. Not the peace of passivity, but the dynamic peace of order, the kind that allows energy to flow freely toward its highest purpose. Maimônides' synthesis extends beyond the individual. For him, the harmony of body and soul mirrors the harmony of society and cosmos. Just as the individual must balance reason and passion, a just society must balance justice and mercy, freedom and discipline. Disorder in the soul leads to disorder in the world. Thus, ethics is not only personal, but cosmic. To cultivate virtue is to participate in the repair of creation, to restore the symmetry of the divine design. This, too, is worship, to heal the world through self-mastery. There is profound poetry in Maimônides' view of knowledge as love. In his hierarchy of existence, the angels represent pure intellect, always in contemplation of God, while humans, though lower, possess something even more beautiful, the freedom to choose understanding. Our search for knowledge is not mere curiosity, it is the soul remembering its source. Each discovery, each insight, each moral victory is a spark of reunion. When the mind truly understands, it does not grow arrogant, it bows. When the heart truly loves, it does not cling, it expands. In that moment, body and soul vibrate with the same rhythm, and the human being becomes what it was meant to be, a conscious reflection of divine unity. This is the mystical dimension of Maimônides, often overlooked by those who read him only as a rationalist. Beneath his precision lies deep reverence. Beneath his logic, love. He does not separate science from sanctity. He elevates both. His God is not a being who demands blind obedience, but the eternal wisdom that orders all things. To know this wisdom is to love it. To love it is to live according to it. And thus, the highest form of worship is understanding. For Maimônides, prayer itself is not a plea for miracles, but a reorientation of the soul. When one prays with understanding, one aligns the inner world with the cosmic order. The words are less important than the awareness they awaken. The act of contemplation, whether of the heavens, the body, or the Torah, becomes a sacred conversation with the divine. In that dialogue, the soul finds balance, and the body becomes a willing participant in holiness. In this way, the synthesis of Maimônides transcends philosophy and enters life. It teaches that true spirituality is not found in escape, but in engagement, not in separation from the world, but in the sanctification of it. Every breath can be sacred, every thought an offering, every act a bridge between heaven and earth. This is the wisdom that unites mind and spirit, body and soul, a wisdom that leads to freedom, peace, and love of truth. And yet, Maimônides never left this synthesis in abstraction. He wanted it lived, embodied, practiced. The question for us, living centuries later, is how to apply this harmony in an age of distraction and fragmentation. How can we recover the balance that he described, not in theory but in daily life? For that, we must look at his practical guidance, the final expression of his philosophy in action. The wisdom of Maimônides was never meant to remain on parchment or confined to scholars' debates. It was designed to be lived in the kitchen, in the marketplace, in the study, and in the silence of one's own heart. For him, the path to balance between body and soul was not a mystical secret, but a disciplined practice. He believed that holiness is found in moderation, not excess, in consciousness, not asceticism. To live wisely, one must treat both the physical and spiritual realms as sacred, two aspects of the same divine order. In the Mishneh Torah, Maimônides outlined the rhythm of a balanced life with the same precision he applied to law and medicine. He advised that a person should eat only when hungry, rest when tired, and engage in physical exercise regularly, for the body is the dwelling of the soul, and a dwelling in disrepair drives out its inhabitant. Nedu, he viewed health not as vanity but as virtue, because the ability to think clearly, to pray deeply, and to act ethically depends upon the body's stability. Thus, self-care becomes an act of service to God. The gym, the kitchen, and the synagogue are all connected in one seamless expression of gratitude for life itself. But Maimônides' concept of balance extends beyond diet and health. It encompasses the entire architecture of human behavior: thought, speech, emotion, and intention. His moral psychology taught that every virtue is a balance between two extremes. Courage, for example, lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lies between miserliness and wastefulness. Humility lies between arrogance and self-deprecation. To find the middle way in each area of life is to live according to divine wisdom. This is what he called the golden mean, and he regarded it as the foundation of ethical and spiritual perfection. To practice this balance in the modern world means reclaiming the art of awareness. We live in an age of extremes, of consumption, distraction, and noise. The soul suffocates not because God is distant, but because our attention is scattered. Maimônides would tell us that the path to peace begins with attention, kavana, the mindful intention that sanctifies ordinary acts. To eat with mindfulness, to speak with restraint, to listen without judgment, these are not small gestures, they are exercises in holiness. When done consciously, every act becomes prayer. In an era of anxiety and overindulgence, his teachings are almost prophetic. He warned against chasing pleasure for its own sake, saying that the pursuit of excess dulls both the body and the mind. Yet he equally warned against needless deprivation, which breeds resentment and hypocrisy. The balanced person, he said, uses the pleasures of the world as medicine, not as food. That is, we engage with the material world not to be enslaved by it, but to sustain ourselves for higher purpose. Food nourishes the body so that the mind may learn. Wealth sustains life so that we may give. Rest renews strength so that we may serve. Maimônides' vision of balance also transforms how we view work and rest. He saw both as sacred duties. Work disciplines the body and trains the will. Rest restores the spirit and deepens gratitude. The Sabbath for him was not merely a day of prohibition, but of liberation. Liberation from the tyranny of labor and consumption. It was a weekly reminder that we are not machines, but souls. In resting, we imitate the Creator's rhythm, acknowledging that perfection is found not in endless doing, but in mindful being. To stop is to remember who we are. The balance between body and soul also demands intellectual humility. Maimônides knew that the human mind, though divine in origin, is limited in scope. True wisdom begins not with knowledge, but with awe. He wrote that the more we understand the vastness of creation, the more we realize our smallness within it, and this realization, far from diminishing us, makes us capable of reverence. The wise person therefore studies not to boast, but to serve, not to control truth, but to be transformed by it. In this humility lies freedom, the freedom to learn, to grow, and to love truth for its own sake. Perhaps the most practical aspect of Maimônides' teaching is his insistence that virtue must be habitual. He taught that moral excellence is not achieved by inspiration alone, but by repetition, by doing what is right until it becomes second nature. Just as the body becomes strong through exercise, the soul becomes balanced through consistent action. Patience grows by enduring, gratitude by practicing thanks, and self-control by small daily victories. The soul, he wrote, is healed by the same means as the body, by training it to its proper habits. In modern language, we might call this spiritual muscle memory. Applying Maimônides' path today means learning to live with both passion and restraint, intellect and emotion, logic and faith. It means seeing the world not as a battlefield between sacred and secular, but as a continuum of meaning where every choice matters. The phone in our hands, the food on our plates, the words we speak, each can either feed the ego or nourish the soul. Balance is not a state we reach once and for all. It is a rhythm we learn to play daily, like a musician tuning his instrument before every song. The beauty of Maimônides' teaching is its universality. Though grounded in Jewish law, its essence transcends religion. It speaks to anyone seeking a sane, ethical, and meaningful life. It calls to those lost in extremes, to the overindulgent and the overly rigid, to the cynic and the fanatic alike, reminding them that truth is found not in excess, but in proportion. He would tell the modern seeker, do not flee the world in pursuit of holiness, and do not lose your soul in pursuit of the world. Walk the middle path with awareness, and you will find both. In practical terms, this means building daily rituals of balance. Begin the day with reflection, not reaction. Before eating, pause in gratitude. When angry, breathe before responding. When studying, seek clarity over complexity. When resting, allow silence to heal the mind. These are not trivial habits. They are sacred disciplines, the tools through which the body and soul learn to live as one. Over time, they reshape character, aligning it with the wisdom of the Creator. Ultimately, Maimônides teaches that balance is not perfection, but harmony. It is not the absence of struggle, but the art of integrating opposites into a coherent whole. The body will always crave. The soul will always aspire. The task is not to silence one or the other, but to make them sing together. In that duet lies serenity, the stillness that arises when every part of our being moves in rhythm with the divine. And so, in the quiet moments when the world's noise fades, one may hear what Maimônides heard centuries ago, the subtle music of creation, inviting us to live wisely, to think deeply, to love purely. To walk through life with moderation and purpose is to turn existence itself into a form of prayer. For when the body acts in harmony with the soul, and the mind sees through the eyes of faith and reason united, the human being becomes what it was always meant to be, a bridge between earth and heaven, flesh and spirit, the finite and the eternal. That is the balance between body and soul according to Maimônides, not a balance of opposition, but of integration, not the rejection of life, but its sanctification. To live this way is to rediscover the sacred in the ordinary, the eternal in the moment, and the divine in oneself. In that discovery lies the peace that surpasses understanding, the peace of a soul finally at home in the world.